With the final season of Squid Game wrapped up, we finally got to see all the games that the show had to offer. There ended up being a pretty good amount of them. Some of them are pretty easy to survive, while others you'd have no chance of making it through. In this video, I'm going to be ranking every game we see in Squid Games to find out which games are the most deadly. You'll want to stick around to the end because the final games might actually surprise you. The easiest game is actually in the new season, so if you've seen season 3, you probably remember Jump Rope. The Jump Rope game was one of the final games, and it required contestants to make it to the other side of a bridge, all while dodging a huge swinging jump rope. I get that this game looks intimidating, but I'm still surprised that so many people lost here. Gion made it across easily and while carrying a baby. Everyone else has no excuse. Well, besides the one being pushed off, I guess. They really didn't have much choice there. Honestly, I think player 222 still had a chance if she tried. She had a sprained ankle, but the bridge really wasn't that long. She definitely could have made it across jumping on one foot, especially if she went first when the rope was much slower. Since the bridge isn't even narrow and your biggest worry would just be other players pushing you, Jump Rope is definitely the easiest game in all the Squid Games. A somewhat similar game is Red Light Green Light, so it's up next on the board. The biggest reason people lose here isn't because the game is difficult, but because it is the first game introduced to the characters. So when they start shooting unexpectedly, it starts up their fight or flight, causing more running and then more deaths. However, if you're aware that this is a life or death situation, then this is one of the easiest games to make it through. You have 5 minutes to make it across, and the field is less than the size of a football field. As long as you stay away from everyone who might try and push you, you can make it across easily with time to spare. Red Light Green Light would actually be a lot harder in real life, because in the show, the robot tells you when it's about to turn around, so you'd have plenty of time to stop. You'd definitely have a better chance of winning here than in real life. The last of the top 3 easiest games is Honeycombs. It's not much of a game, more like a succeed or fail task. Your objective is to free the shape inside the cookie without breaking it within the time limit. There are only 4 shapes: circle, triangle, star, and umbrella. Knowing the game ahead of time, you'll just want to avoid the umbrella, obviously. But even if you get stuck with the hardest shape, our protagonist managed to find a way out, so you can easily just mimic him by licking the cookie. You're probably thinking to yourself that knowing the game ahead of time will obviously make it easier, so it's unfair to rank it so soon, which is fair for you to say. Even if you had no knowledge of the honeycombs and what the shapes meant ahead of time, you'd still have a 3 out of 4 chance of getting an easier shape. As long as you keep a steady hand and take your time, you'd make it out. The real reason this game is considered one of the easiest is the same reason that Jump Rope and Red Light Green Light are so easy. It's the fact that these games don't involve you having to rely on anyone else. In Jump Rope and Red Light Green Light, it's up to you to make it across on your own. With the sugar cookies, it's up to you not to break it. You don't have to worry about how strong your team is, or others who are just bad and then bring you down with them. Since all you have to rely on is yourself, victory is all but secured if you have the skills to succeed. However, I can't say the same for the next game. Unlike the previous games, hide and seek is much more of a challenge, since you must either kill one person to move on as a seeker or be a hider and find the exit, trying to survive the time limit. There are a lot of small elements to this game on both sides that can alter the game drastically. Seekers get these knives that they can use to kill, while hiders are given keys to open doors. However, it's clear that the hiders got the short end of the stick when it comes to tools, because their keys can only open certain doors, and they aren't allowed to lock them once they have been opened. Also, not every key unlocks every door, with the final door requiring all 3 different keys to escape. Our first choice would be deciding if we'd rather be a seeker or a hider. I don't know how good you are with a knife, but I know I probably wouldn't have the guts or the skills to be able to kill someone. If you're good with a short blade, then that makes your decision a whole lot easier. Otherwise, being a hider is a way better deal. Sticking in a large group is going to make defending against an attack incredibly easy, along with having multiple key variants. Plus, taking out a seeker would grant you their knife, so now you have the keys and the weapons. If I was a seeker and I saw a group of hiders ready to gang up on me, I think I'd pass. There are also a lot of rooms with only 1 door. With a small group of people, you could easily block the door from the inside, making sure no seekers can make it in. Then just wait out the time and it's on to the next round. Hide and seek is definitely a lot more dangerous, especially since there are so many new elements introduced into the game that you wouldn't be able to control. Still, with these strategies in mind, hide and seek would be a walk in the park. Now that you've already established a large group, Mingle would be so much easier. A large group of 5 or 6 people works best, especially if you've established a closer relationship with 2 or 3 people within that group. Any amount of people you need in a room is relatively easy to achieve if you already have this group dynamic set up beforehand. This game does rely on others not messing things up for you, so there's still that element of uncontrolled risk. But since you have your group, defending off outsiders shouldn't be much of an issue. You want to keep your group safe as much as you can, but if you have to, they always work well for sacrifices. Just don't let anybody see you getting your allies eliminated, or else they might not be as welcoming when the next game starts. Marbles is the next game game, and it's interesting because you and your opponent get to choose the game, but it has to involve you receiving all 10 of their marbles. This can range from skill games to random luck games. You obviously know what you'd be better at and would want to get a game that's closer to your skills. If you knew you had bad aim, you'd want to avoid a game where you try and throw marbles accordingly. So instead, choose a random chance game, like one where they must guess how many marbles are in your hand. There's also the loophole many have pointed out with how the rules are said. They only say that you must obtain your opponent's marbles. They never said you had to keep all of yours. So in theory, you could just trade marbles with your opponent and survive this way. I doubt that would actually work since they want to see some games being played and marbles is supposed to eliminate half of the contestants. However, you only have to beat one person at this game and you get to choose it. I'm not saying that it secures an easy victory, but I do think your chances are pretty high if you get lucky. Rock, paper, scissors -1 wasn't in the actual Squid Games, but since it's just as deadly, I'm gonna include it. Rock, paper, scissors is really risky. It's pretty much just up to chance. The -1 version of the game makes it a lot more interesting. Now you have to read your opponent. Even if you lose, there's still another round of Russian roulette that strengthens your odds of survival. This game is definitely deadly, but like in marbles, you only have to beat one person. I feel like this placement is the most fitting since you don't really get to influence the game this time. The last game of season 3 was very interesting because it allowed for multiple finalists. This is really good for us because the more people in the finals means the more people who survive. In Sky Squid Game, one person must be eliminated off of each of the 3 platforms. This tends to get ugly because no one wants to be the guy who gets eliminated. As we see in the last episode, there are so many different ways to handle this game. If everyone played fair, you can draw straws or do some other version of a game like rock, paper, scissors. If no one wants to play along, you hopefully still have your group to help you push them off. Each pillar also has this nice handy dandy pole in the middle, so you'll want to be grabbing that first for obvious reasons. I think there are just so many ways for multiple people to survive the Sky Squid Game that I'm surprised it's the final game of the show. Now we're getting into some pretty difficult territory. There are no games left that give you the freedom of relying only on yourself, so the rest of the games ongoing are pretty risky. Let's hope you picked a strong group because Tug of War is our next game. Tug of War relies almost purely on strength. It doesn't matter how in sync you are with your team if the opposing side is just too strong in the end. There are strategies to winning such as tugging all at the same time and maneuvering as we see in the show, but these can be risky and don't guarantee a victory. Winning Tug of War really comes down to how well you are with others beforehand. If you have a strong group, you have the best chances. At the end of the day, Tug of War still feels like a toss-up. You might disagree with me here, but I think Squid Game would be the next likely game to survive, and it takes 3rd place and the most deadliest. The rules of the actual Squid Game are pretty confusing, but since there are only 2 people left at the end, it's pretty much just a 1v1 to the death. If you've made it this far in the games, then your opponent is likely similar to you in stature and strength, because if everyone else took out those they deemed as too threatening, neither of you would be in the finals. Unlike all the other games, the only way you're winning Squid Game is through strength and agility in combat. There really is no way to trick your opponent or bend the rules to your favor. The stronger player is coming out on top. Despite only having to beat one person, without weapons, this is going to be a difficult task that you likely won't survive. Coming in 2nd place for deadliest game in Squid Games is Glass Bridge. I would be terrified if I had to play this game no matter what position I put in. The bridge has so many steps, and the odds for the first half of players surviving is basically 0. You'd think being in the very last position would guarantee that you didn't have to make a 50-50 choice, but now you pretty much have to wait and hope that everyone in front of you is brave enough to risk their lives before the time runs out. I know there will be plenty of people with a mentality that if they are going down, then everyone else is too, and this is definitely going to get you killed. The chances of surviving Glass Bridge is really low and basically out of your control, unless you want to risk it all and go first. We've gone through every game in Squid Game but one, and this one is by far the deadliest game in all of Squid Game. Playing the 6-legged race will undoubtedly get you killed. In this game, you are tied at the ankles to 4 other players. You must make it around the circle in only 5 minutes while doing each of the minigames around the path. There are 5 minigames, 1 for each person, so that leaves you with only 1 minute per game, not including the time it takes to get around each game, which is also a challenge since you are tied to so many people. The minigames are Dachi, Flying Stone, Gongi, Spinning Top, and Hacky Sack. I would not be able to do all these by myself, let alone with the pressure of others relying on me. Let's look at each of these minigames individually. Dashi is a game we see them play at the subway when they are introduced to the game show. I've personally never played this, but by the way we see them lose so often, this must be pretty hard to do if you don't know what you're doing. Flying Stone is next and might be the easiest to win, but could take up a ton of time if you miss, since you have to drag your team to retrieve the stone for another try. You also need a ton of arm room for a good throw, and being tied to others is definitely going to hinder your performance. Gongi is interesting because you either know how to do it or you don't. You have to pick up these little shapes in a specific order and a specific way without messing up once, or else you have to start all over. This is incredibly hard, even for people who have been doing it since they were young. Next is spinning top. I didn't even know this was a game until this challenge. You have to wrap up a top and make it spin. But like in throwing stones, if you mess up, you have to retrieve the top to try again, making this part of the race the most challenging with how much time it takes to reset. The final game in the race is hacky sack, which is again more of a skill than a game, since you must already be pretty good at it in order to win. The worst part about this is that hacky sack is way easier with both your feet, but since you're tied to someone else, your amount of movement is greatly limited. Even after making it past all the games, you better pray you can outrun the clock and make it to the finish line. All the minigames in the 6-legged race require that you have some skill with them in the past. You are not spinning a top unless you've done it before, and you are not winning gongi unless you've mastered it as a kid. Only one person is allowed per game, and that's the deadliest part of this game. You are losing if there is just one person on your team who fails. You can make it all the way around to the last game perfectly, but if they fumble and just don't know what they're doing, they are dragging you down with them, and all you can do is watch. This isn't surprising though. Every game has been consistently more and more difficult the more it requires the help of others. The easiest games are the ones where all you need is yourself, but as soon as teammates are involved, suddenly you have no control over the situation. You don't know how good they really are or how much you can trust them in the end. That makes the games with teammates the deadliest there is. And that's all the games in Squid Games, from easiest to hardest. Some of these games look pretty scary in the show, but are actually a walk in the park in real life. I was surprised how many I think I would actually end up surviving. If you like this ranking or thought some games were unappreciated, let me know how you would rank them, and if you think you survived the Squid Games. As always, make sure to like and subscribe for more Squid Game content.